Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Clayton Britt Show. Today we are going to be talking about live golf versus the PGA Tour. This is a podcast I have been waiting to do for a while because of the complex nature of the issue, but it's a still rapidly evolving situation. And so this will hopefully serve as a comprehensive kind of understanding and breakdown of what all the problems are relating to this. And hopefully you come out smarter and I can clarify some of my own thinking. So in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about what is live golf, why they are significant, how this all started, the PGA Tour's response to the issue, why this is a tough decision for players, and the pros and cons for each tour, as well as extraneous details that make this way more complicated than it seems on a surface level. So to start, what is live golf? Live golf is a new golf tour started by Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman, who is MBS. He's kind of the top guy in Saudi Arabia. And it is funded by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the PIF. And this tour is 54-hole events. It's shotgun starts. So to non-golf people, shotgun start means the whole course, like you could start on the 17th hole, the 4th hole, the 1st hole. Everybody starts at the same time. So theoretically, play should be done in 4 hours. You all get the same weather, all that stuff. And they're hosting a series of events around the world. I think 3 or 4 in the United States, 3 or 4 outside the United States. And pretty much what people are saying is that this is Saudi Arabia trying to sports wash their reputation and use sports as a way to kind of get them more favorable in the world order, picture, whatever you want to call that. And what they have been doing is, so this was founded by Greg Norman, who's had beef with the PGA Tour for a long time, and this has kind of been in the works for a bunch of years. But the second event is actually this weekend going on, I think right now in Oregon, at Pumpkin Ridge, where Tiger won one of his U.S. amateurs. I think versus Steve Scott, too. That's we'll see if I'm right on that. I can check back later. But live golf is these 54-hole shotgun start events. There's some team format. There's some individual format. And all of these events have big purses, $25 million, which is as big as pretty much the biggest events on tour. And so why this is significant? This is significant because the PGA Tour has kind of had a monopoly when it comes to golf. I mean, there are other tours around the world, but PGA Tour has always been number one. And I think even the European Tour acknowledges that the PGA Tour is the top place. And also the European Tour is also known as the DP World Tour. I think it got a rebrand a couple years ago. And so how this all started, where really all of the controversy came about, started with Phil Mickelson. I think it was the week of the Genesis, which is at Riviera, which is Tiger's tournament. Tiger's tournament is also the Hero World Challenge down in Albany in the Bahamas. But Riviera is one of the bigger events, and Alan Shipnuck, who is a golf writer, released some comments from Phil Mickelson that were going to be included in Alan's book, which is now out. I think it's the rip-roaring and unauthorized biography of Phil Mickelson. So it goes into all of Phil's personal drama. Overall, he said it's a pretty balanced look, but these comments were very relevant, and Phil said that these comments were off the record. Alan Shipnuck confirmed that they were not off the record. There's still a dispute there, but pretty much what Phil said is that he is trying to use Saudi Arabia as leverage against the PGA Tour in order to increase purses and all these things. Because while the PGA Tour seems all great, PGA Tour players have to pay fees to use their own name, image, and likeness, and there's tons of media rights stuff. They have to play a bunch of events, and I don't know all of the details, given that I am not a PGA Tour professional, but there's some stuff that players have not kind of been happy about with the PGA Tour, but the PGA Tour has had no real reason to change because they're number one and they have no competition. But Phil was trying to use Saudi Arabia to get the PGA Tour to kind of evolve and change. However, Phil also acknowledged that he said the Saudis are scary MFers, and that they have a terrible track record with human rights stuff, and that they killed, I think it was a Washington Post or New York Times reporter, Khashoggi, and everybody kind of knows about that. So Phil was really the first person to be transparent, even though this wasn't meant to be public. He said the quiet parts out loud about their human rights record and all the bad things that they've done. And so this caused massive backlash. And then nobody had really committed to it at that point. So it was like, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And then Phil took a break, and then the first event comes back in London and for Live Golf, and Phil and a bunch of other players had committed, including Dustin Johnson. So where this all gets even crazier and complicated is that the Saudis have so much money from their investment fund, the PIF. They have $620 billion in there that we know of. And so they're throwing a $200 million check at Phil, a $125 million check at DJ to get all of these players, and that is guaranteed upfront money that they can win in addition to the bigger prizes that they're going to be playing for on the Live Tour. So that's a lot of money. $125 to $200 million is a lot of money, and as guys that like Phil and DJ are, they're getting a little older. I mean, if they have a great season on tour, maybe they win $5 million. Let's say they have $20 million in sponsorships, which would be Phil, I think, does coming in annually for sponsorships, or did, and DJ's probably a little bit less than that. But let's say the best case on PGA Tour is, or a year of earning is $25 million. You can make 4 times that just by signing up, and then if you still can keep some sponsors as well as win some events with bigger purses, you can win $4 million in a week. So it's a lot of money. And the Saudis' thought process is that they are throwing these big sums of money at these players to try and poach them from the PGA Tour in hopes that they eventually get enough guys to fill out, I think it's a 48-man field for the Live Golf events. And what is a weird situation is that the Saudis are not necessarily doing this to turn a profit. Maybe eventually they would like to, but the goal is really to change their image globally, and they feel that they've done this with other sports too, like Formula One, where they put big investments in Formula One, so there's races there and stuff like that. And they also did it, I think, with Premier League. They might have bought a team. So the term is called sports washing, which I brought up earlier. But so that's kind of their game plan, to start a new tour, poach these guys from the PGA Tour in hopes to get return on investment with other stuff, because the world is more okay with interacting and doing deals with Saudi Arabia. So the PGA Tour now, to get to the PGA Tour's response, they immediately banned all the players that went to the first Live Golf event and said you can't, well, first of all, they denied their releases. And why that is significant is PGA Tour players are technically contractors for the tour, but they still have to, through the PGA Tour handbook that they signed, they still have to apply to releases to play other events. And they denied the releases to play in the Saudi or the Live Golf event, and so then they banned the players that went anyways, like lifetime ban. So the issue of contractors versus employees is a big one, because guys like Greg Norman, who's the commissioner of Live Golf, says you can't do that. They're contractors; they can play wherever they want. But they say, no, they sign the handbook, they can. So that's a whole legal issue of, are they contractors versus employees, which is another fascinating thing when it comes to companies like Uber and health benefits and insurance. So that's a whole legal issue there. But the PGA Tour also has had no real competition like this, and so their monopoly is being threatened. But the way the PGA Tour has set up, they they actually don't make a lot of money, and they give a ton back to charity, and that's kind of how they do their business in order to get special tax exemptions and stuff like that. But they now have to compete with somebody that pretty much has limitless spending capability in order to get their tour started, which is not a battle you're going to win, because then it comes into a question of loyalty. But when you ban the players, then they are no longer loyal to you. And then now we come in with the DP World Tour, which is formerly the European Tour, and they are now working with the PGA Tour. I think they signed a 13-year partnership, something like that. And I'll read you a little section from a golf.com article. There's a 13-year joint operational agreement between their organizations, a deal designed to provide a fresh pathway for players onto the PGA Tour while increasing prize money in the DP World Tour or World Golf Tour events as part of the arrangement. The PGA Tour will increase its ownership stake in the European Tour productions from 15% to 40%, providing a cash infusion to boost purses. The arrangement also guarantees that starting in 2023, the top 10 finishers on the DP World Tour will receive a PGA Tour card for the following season, because the DP World Tour also has alliances with the Sunshine Tour and the ISPS Honda PGA Tour of Australasia. Sorry, that one's a mouthful. The partnership will open pathways towards the upper echelons for players from around the world. So that's a big deal, because now if you're a big person on the DP World Tour or the Asian Tour, and you get an offer from Live Golf, you might be less inclined to take it because of the fact that you now have a way of getting onto the PGA Tour. And then a big concern for these guys that signed with Live is kind of how long Live is going to be around, because the money could stop whenever the Saudis feel like it's not really a great idea anymore. So now going into why this is a tough decision for players. Phil kind of hit the nail on the head, which is it's a lot of money. You can leverage it to change the PGA Tour, and you're going to have to deal with the fact that they have a terrible human rights record, and that people have been saying blood money, left and right. So it's kind of where the money is coming from. And the Live Golf has gotten players like Bryson DeChambeau, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Patrick Reed, and also a bunch of top young amateurs. So initially, the first tranche of guys for Live Golf, they were all older, people like Louis Oosthuizen, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, where they don't want to play the schedule that they would have to on the PGA Tour, and they also are kind of past their prime, so this is a chance to get one last big payday that they've really never had before, where these guys some of them are getting offers that are more than their career earnings on tour just to show up at the Live events before they make any money. The Live events are also no cut, and everybody gets paid. So I think the last place person at these Live events gets $120,000, and at PGA Tour events, if you miss the cut, you get $0. So sounds like a pretty good deal. So the pros for the Live event is you get more money, you upfront, as well as more money for each individual tournament. You work less because there are less events. The guaranteed cash is big, because I heard from, I think it was Kevin Kisner that said it, where he said it costs about $10,000 a week to play the PGA Tour properly. And by properly, he meant with good travel accommodations, as well as lodging for your caddy, food, physio, trainers, all that stuff costs about $10,000 a week. So if you play 30 events, that's $300,000 that you have to make to break even, and that is $300,000 post-tax. So you really got to make more than that, because you're in a higher tax bracket unless you live in Florida. But I'm pretty sure the way it works is that you get taxed from where you make the money each individual state. So if you win in California, it's different than winning in Florida, despite your residency, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, it's lots of guaranteed money. You get more time with your family. because you play less. It's less holes, and families are also encouraged and welcome. And I've also heard that there's way better accommodations for caddies. Caddies make, I think, 10% roughly of what a PGA Tour player makes, but there's better accommodations and living and stuff, and that the travel's being reimbursed. And you also get to play new different courses. Pat Perez has been kind of one of the players that have stood out there and said that the PGA Tour players don't actually play great courses most of the time because they're playing the TPC kind of PGA Tour run events. And so these live events also give them a chance to play great new courses, which is a minor thing, but still interesting. There's also a team component to this. So I'm, as somebody that has paid a fair amount of attention to this, to say the least, the fact that I still am unclear of the team format shows that it needs work. But there's an individual check every week, and I think a team check every week. And then at the end of the year, there's a big team pool for whichever team does the best, I believe. But you get a team event, so even if you don't play well, you're also playing for others. There's more camaraderie, all that stuff. And you're on the course at the same time as everybody, so you get the same draw weather-wise and all that stuff, and it should theoretically be faster, and it's a different environment for the fans because all the players are on the course at the same time. So those are a lot of the pros for LIV Golf. However, there are also some pros for the PGA Tour, which is there's no questions with eligibility. You know it's going to be around for a while. It's way more publicly acceptable because of the PGA Tour doesn't have ties to Saudi Arabia with the human rights violations. And it's still the strongest field in golf for now. So there's a lot to consider here. But what really makes this all interesting is the major championships and the team events and the official World Golf ranking points. Because the fear for a lot of these guys is that they wouldn't be allowed to play in the majors, which is what they really care about. Because they're loyal to the major championships, they're not as loyal to the PGA Tour. So if you can make more money while working less and still play in the majors, that's a really hard deal to say no to. In the U.S. Open, so this now to take a step back. For non-golf people, there are a bunch of different governing bodies in golf. There's the R&A, which controls the Open Championship. There is the USGA, which controls the U.S. Open. There's the PGA Tour. There is the official World Golf Ranking people. Then there is the PGA of America, and then there is also the Augusta National Golf Club or Committee, which run the Masters. So the PGA Championship is associated with the PGA of America. They are different than the PGA Tour. But the LIV event hadn't happened yet at the time of the PGA, so all the players played at Southern Hills. No big deal. But then the U.S. Open happened the week after the first LIV event in London, and the U.S. Open did not ban the players because a lot of the players, like Bryson or Brooks or DJ, had exemptions into the U.S. Open field. And Phil had an exemption too because of his PGA Championship win in Kiowa. So the U.S. Open took the stance that they have qualified, they have earned it, we are not going to ban them from our event. So the players played, and that set the precedent that the players are going to be allowed to play in the majors. And then the R&A has spoken and said that as the most open championship in the world, where I could theoretically, I think I need my handicap to be a little bit lower, but I could theoretically go out and play qualifiers, and if I played unbelievably well, make it and play in the Open. So they pride themselves on not blocking anybody out, and they have said that the players are going to be allowed to play from LIV Golf. And the PGA of America, I believe, took the same stance for the PGA Championship. So the last one that's been undecided is Augusta National with the Masters, but there are a ton of past champions that are Live Golf members. Charles Schwartzel, Patrick Reed, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, all of these guys. So how it works at Augusta is if you win the Masters, you get a lifetime exemption to the event. And so they would have to ban 5 or 6 no, it's not 5 or 6. I think probably 3 or 4 active players that can play that are champions, past champions. So it's unlikely that they're going to do that given their history. But these were big dominoes to fall in favor of Live Golf, because all of these major championships, being individual entities, are only concerned about the strength of field for their one event a year. And so you don't want to block out a bunch of the top players and say they can't play, and then your one event a year has less juice because PJ's not there, Koepka's not there, Bryson's not there, Phil's not there. So that was big for Live Golf, that the majors didn't say anything. Another interesting part of this is the official World Golf Ranking points. So there is a committee that decides which events globally give official World Golf Ranking points. And the official World Golf Ranking points help you qualify for majors, but they also help you qualify for team events like the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup. And they have made exceptions to events like Tiger's event, not the Genesis, the Hero World Challenge in Albany. They have made exceptions and said that despite that being a limited field event with, I think, only 20 or 30 guys, that they get official World Golf Ranking points. The Live events do not have that yet, given that they're 54 holes shotgun start. And so the reason why the 54 holes in shotgun start is significant, because all of the golf traditionalists are saying, well, that's not a real golf tournament. You play 72 holes. It's not shotgun start. You get the draw with the weather. And all these guys are like, we're still all the best players in the world playing in a competitive event. What does it matter? So that's another domino that has yet to fall. But a lot of these guys now are no longer eligible for the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup. And there are some really big names. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then another small part of this is the TV deals, where Live Golf is broadcasting on YouTube right now. And a couple years ago, the PGA Tour signed a deal with their media partners that pretty much, I think, gave them mostly exclusivity, but also locked them in for the future. And so those TV partners are committed to the PGA Tour because of the fact that if they stick with the PGA Tour, then the PGA Tour will have a stronger strength of field because the Live event is getting less coverage, and therefore their tournaments will get more views, better ratings, more advertising revenue for the TV partners. So the Live Golf is on YouTube right now, but is in talks with a bunch of different TV broadcast partners to try and figure out a network to broadcast it. And if they get that, then that's another big source of income for Live Golf that will offset some of their costs of poaching a lot of the best players in the world. And so initially the PGA Tour just reacted with bans for players and said, we're the best tour, all the best people play here, all this stuff. But I got to give Phil Mickelson some credit here, because he was right. Because just, I think last week, it was announced that a bunch of different events, I believe 8 events, including Century Tournament of Champions, the Genesis Invitational, Arnold Palmer, the Players, WGC Dell Technologies Match Play, Memorial, the FedEx St. Jude Championship, and the BMW Championship, all had big purse increases. For Century Tournament of Champions, it went $8.2 million to $15 million. Genesis, $12 million to $20 million. Arnold Palmer, $12 to $20. Players, $20 to $25. The Match Play, $12 to $20 million. Memorial, $12 to $20. FedEx St. Jude, $15 to $20. And BMW, $15 to $20. So I think that's around $50 million in purse increases that have just kind of come out of thin air. Jay Monahan, commissioner of the tour, has said that they asked a lot of their partners, and their partners responded with how can they help. And that's where the money came from. But this was Phil's point of the PGA Tour can be doing more than they are doing to raise the purses. And what is interesting about golf is that if you think about baseball, the contracts are fully guaranteed. Basketball, it's fully guaranteed. Football is more incentive laden contracts than either of those. But golf, it's one of the only sports where when you're a top player, you can imagine if LeBron showed up to a Laker game and said, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm actually going to be getting paid today. It depends on if I scored 25 or more." That would be a really weird concept. Or Tom Brady in the NFL saying, "Oh, I got to throw 2 touchdowns in order to get my paycheck for today's game." Golf's really the only sport where the top players don't have guaranteed money. And so, except for certain events like the WGCs, where it's a no-cut event, and I think you make $50,000 as long as you hit one shot, and then you can withdraw. But so that was a big change with the increase in purses. And where this gets to be a really slippery slope is something that one of the top guys at the USGA had pointed out, which was that they are not in charge of auditing. They said they had 9,000 applicants to the U.S. Open and people that played in qualifying and qualifiers, and they cannot be responsible for investigating all of the business dealings that every single one of their players do, and so they shouldn't be banning them based off of that, because they also don't do that thorough of a check necessarily with a lot of their partners. They're not going to partner with some terrible company, but they're not going into if Rolex is a sponsor. They're not going into Rolex financial details to see where Rolex is getting their money from. They kind of said, it's none of my business, which I think is a fair point. Because it gets to be a slippery slope of if KPMG is sponsoring one of the women's majors, well, where does KPMG have all of their holdings? Do they have holdings in the Middle East? Do they have holdings in China? Do they have holdings in certain countries in South America? So it's a very slippery slope of, well, if you start investigating people and banning them based off their business interests, where does it end? Which I thought was a really good point and something I hadn't thought about up until then. And especially with an example, which nobody likes to talk about, and this is a relatively sensitive subject, but China also has significant human rights violations. With the stuff with the Uyghur Muslims, what's going on is terrible and nobody's talking about it. And that is on a truly massive scale, yet all these companies like Apple and Nike and a million more are producing things and have heavy ties with China. And so it's one of these things where, well, where does it end, and why are we not drawing a line with China that we're drawing with Saudi Arabia? I get from the United States point of view of Saudi Arabia was largely one of the reasons why 9/11 happened, because of they provided a bunch of terrorists that helped to carry that out. And so I get it, and it's terrible. But where do you draw the line? Where I'm fine if you want to draw the line and say, we don't do business dealings with companies or countries that have bad human rights violations. That is great. I would love for companies and countries to stand for that. However, I get frustrated when there's the inconsistency. If you want to draw that line and say we only deal with good people, that's great. But if you start picking and choosing, well, this human rights violation is a little bit worse than this one, so I guess we'll work with these guys but not these guys, that's where I get frustrated. And so what the USGA said is they said, we're not getting into that at all. It's not our business. And so that I thought was a really good point. I just thought that was a really good point, but a real line in the sand that was drawn, because the major championships have pretty much said it's none of my business. And so to kind of wrap this all up, it's going to be interesting to see how Live Golf continues to recruit players and poach players, because as these events go on and they continue to get rave reviews from players, you can't blame other guys for wanting to go take a life-changing generational wealth type of check that they're not going to get on the PGA Tour. So I get it. And I don't fault any of them for doing it, because ultimately, if you had told a normal, pretend you go and talk to a construction worker and say, hey, you can work less, get paid more, have better living accommodations, your family can come to work with you when you want, if you want, and you're going to get some pushback on where the money comes from. I think most Americans would take that deal, because I think a lot of the times the media takes the moral high ground because they can, but when push comes to shove, ultimately I believe that your responsibility is, because I'm talking about men here, is to take care of your family and provide, and this is an incredible opportunity to do that. And Live Golf has also gone and started venturing towards getting younger players too. And so these top amateurs that would come out and have to earn their PGA Tour card and play in all 30 events in a year, and if they're lucky, they make 600, maybe $1 million. They're now getting multi-million-dollar checks where you don't know what their financial background is. And if a top young amateur is going to get a $20 million check, like, that's your retirement, that's your kid's college, that's your parents' mortgage, that you can have a house. That's life-changing money, and so I don't blame these guys for taking it. But the reason why there's been such a big pushback is because of the human rights violations, because of the media taking a moral high ground, and because of the PGA Tour having had a monopoly for so long that any real threat to it, they're trying to pretty much speak down upon. And so it's really, really interesting and a fascinating subject. And I'm not sure where the future of this goes, because if the investment fund decides that they don't want to keep doing golf, they don't have to do it, and they can pull the money, and these guys will have gotten their money up front. But then what do? Because they're banned from the PGA Tour. Does the PGA Tour let them back? All that stuff. Bryson and Koepka also did not resign their PGA Tour card, so they're waiting for a second round of suspensions from Jay Monahan, kind of really force his hand, saying we still want to play the PGA Tour sometimes, but we want to do this in addition to, which we should be allowed to, given that we're independent contractors. So it'll be interesting to see who goes next and what other big names fall and go to Live Golf, and if Live Golf gets any television partners. And the other day when I looked on YouTube, there was like 10,000 people watching for a good stretch, which is, I don't know what typical Thursday PGA Tour ratings are, but I can't imagine that there's 50,000 people watching live on a Thursday for a random PGA Tour event. So we'll see how that goes. It's definitely going to be interesting. There will most likely need to be another update on this either in a month or in a couple months. But yeah, just fascinating subject. I hope I answered a lot of questions and kind of explained what the real main issues are with this. And yeah, thanks for listening, and talk soon.